question for you, chat. What do frozen pizzas, not buying new underwear, and eating Chipotle with your hands while watching Ludwig all have in common? Likely these three, it could be depression. It could also be recession indicators. That is what the internet would have you believe. And it started when I saw this tweet from friend of the stream, Whodat950, who said, recession's so bad, I'm watching Ludwig videos again. And I went down a rabbit hole of everyone calling every different thing a recession indicator. I mean, I saw Orca wearing a dead salmon hat, recession indicator. I saw the return of Squilliam Fancy Son to SpongeBob SquarePants, recession indicator. I saw Crackle nail polish in 2025, recession indicator. The quality of chopsticks is down, we're in a recession. Leonardo DiCaprio stopped dating under 25-year-olds and started dating a 27-year-old. We've gotta be in a recession. Even under my own videos, I dropped a video on the LA protests and the top comment was, Atrioc being serious is basically a recession signal in itself. It got 3,000 upvotes. So I think this deserved further scrutiny. But the biggest and most obvious recession indicator was obviously people having no money. As someone who has made videos about this type of thing in the past, I wanted to look deeper and see if there's any truth to this, to look at these different various recession indicators and analyze them point by point to see if we can draw any sort of larger conclusions. And before you actually me, just to be clear, a recession is generally defined as 2 quarters in a row of negative economic growth. Q1 2025 was negative. If Q2 comes out and it's also negative, then we are in an official NBER defined recession. But that is kind of boring and requires us to wait a long time. Again, the number might come out positive and then get revised down. This could take months, this could take years before we know if we're in an official recession. We have to use social media and trends and TikTok to find out now. And so we're gonna do that today. So if you wanna hear my official opinion using actual GDP and labor statistics, you can watch my video called Slowly Then All at Once. Everything in it I still stand by, and all the things I said in there about the labor market have only continued to get weaker, but that video is not today's video. Today's video is about recession indicators. Weirder ones and funnier ones, the better. You can listen to Ray Dalio sound the alarm or Jamie Dimon sound the alarm, but what we want to hear is what someone on TikTok is doing to sound the alarm. Now, and also worth saying before we get into this, it's a contested issue. While many people on the internet are noticing ominous signs that the economy might be deteriorating, and I personally am looking at the official economic data and seeing there's clear signs of strain, some people have the opposite opinion.
And most importantly for the people in this room, the days of economic misery under the last administration are rapidly giving way to the greatest economy in the history of the world. We are rocking. The United States is the hottest country, with the exception of your country, I have to say, right? I'm not gonna take that on. No, Mohammed, I'm not gonna take that on.
So maybe the US, outside of Saudi Arabia, is the hottest economy in the history of the world. We'll find out. But I broke this down in different categories so we could go point by point and see if there's any truth to some of these so-called social media recession indicators. Let's start with food. That joke I made at the beginning about frozen pizza was not a joke. It's called the Pepperoni Price Index, and it's actually real. Now, food in general, people often say is a recession indicator because when people get nervous, as the world gets more uncertain, they gravitate towards more comfort foods. And you might say that frozen pizza is that, but actually that's not the case. The Pepperoni Price Index is something very specific that's triggering right now, and it's about bougie frozen pizzas. And you'd think, okay, in a recession, times are tough. People buy the cheaper stuff. No. In fact, during a recession, people buy the most expensive, nicest frozen pizzas because they are trading down from restaurants. Instead of going out to eat, they splurge on a nice frozen pizza. So when the good stuff starts doing well, that's a sign the economy is in trouble. This one has been researched and there's found to be a pretty strong correlation, at least in the last 2008 recession. There are other food recession indicators that are less true. Like Edgar Allan Ponis, who said, the Cheesecake Factory is cutting 13 menu items. This is a recession indicator. Is much less likely to be true because the Cheesecake Factory still has 250 items. So I'm not sure this actually means anything. Other things in food include the snacking recession. People have noticed recently that Americans are buying fewer treats. And this is relevant because just 1 year ago, I made a video about the $100 billion snack war that was heating up as companies were racing to overbid each other to buy big snack brands. Now, just 1 year later, a lot of those bets are not paying off. J.M. Smucker's sales have fell 7%. General Mills is seeing a slowdown in snacking. People are buying fewer of these tasty treats, and it's an indicator that people are cutting back on perhaps the most splurge aspects of their diet. This effect, by the way, doesn't just apply to human snacks, it applies even harder to pet snacks. People will always buy their pet dog food if they can afford it, but the extra stuff, the bonus treats, is usually a sign of a healthy economy where you're willing to splurge. The pets are actually suffering from this recession most of all as people cut back on toys and treats for the doggos. Additionally, this snacking slowdown is borne out by evidence as well. This meta study of the 2008 recession showed that there is a strong correlation between decreasing fast food, sugary products, and soft drinks and a recession. And it's not because of people being healthier, it's because they just overall buy less of it. They just have less money. It's just less food, really. Before you say this is a good thing, it's really not. It's really not, but there could be some health benefits. Restaurants are seeing a slowdown. Restaurants, which were previously in a bit of a boom, are seeing possible 7% less spending this summer as consumers cut back on outbound spending. However, while this might be a recession indicator, I want to show the contra here. People are buying more takeout than ever. In fact, as I researched for this video, I realized that every Zoomer in my chat who makes fun of me for buying Uber Eats Chipotle is a hypocrite. The stats for Gen Z and young millennials are absurd. It's becoming like no longer an indulgence, but a foundation of modern life. There's a true cultural shift towards more and more takeout orders. In fact, the stats are pretty stark. 75% of restaurant traffic in 2025 is now takeout orders. Now that includes drive-thrus and that includes pickup. So it's not all like Uber Eats delivery, DoorDash delivery, but it's becoming where restaurants are primarily vehicles for people to take food home and not to sit in and eat. It's getting crazy. And this is 5 years out of COVID. 95% of consumers deem speed as critical to the experience, while 90% see it as the top priority. People want their food elsewhere. So this is changing. And so it's hard to say if you can take this as a recession indicator when the woman appalled by cost of groceries is spending $40 on a private taxi for her burrito. Maybe the economy's better than I think. However, looking even more into it, there are some cracks. Namely, how DoorDash and Uber Eats, to maintain their growth, have been pushing more and more buy now, pay later at checkout. This is a main splash screen on DoorDash.com, and more Americans are not just financing their mac and cheese with DoorDash and Klarna, but also they're financing groceries. This is just from a month ago. People are using Klarna and Afterpay for day-to-day groceries. So I think the recession indicator here is still on. There's still clearly signs of a unhealthy rot under the surface of these big earnings numbers from companies like DoorDash and Uber Eats. And finally, in the category of food, perhaps the most damning signal at all is that a Dunkin' Donuts in Boston just closed. If a Dunkin' Donuts in Boston, downtown Boston, is closing, the economy can't be great. But that's food. What about music? Music has always been a sign of the times. People use it as a way to express themselves and how they're feeling about the world around them. That stands to reason that it would tie in closely with the economy. And one of the first recession indicators I found seemed like a pretty damning one. Kesha removed the dollar sign from her name. That's a recession indicator. If she can't even have the dollar in her name, how do we have dollars in our lives? The problem with this one, this tweet is recent, but it actually happened in 2014. And as someone who was looking for a job in 2014, it's actually a much better time. The economy was pretty good. So I actually think it's the opposite. I think if Kesha ever adds the dollar sign back to her name, then we're in a recession. But pop music can possibly be a predictor of a recession. There's articles and studies about this, basically saying that during down economic periods, people crave and gravitate towards more friendly, upbeat bubblegum pop. this rise in this type of feel-good, mindless pop is an indicator of economic stress as people look to a bit of escapism in the world. And it is kind of stands to reason, there's at least interesting, that as we say this, Stressed Out by 21 Pilots from the last recession is now re-entering the global Spotify chart. But the real music they're talking about is not Stressed Out. It's more of like I've Got a Feeling by the Black Eyed Peas is considered like the ultimate recession pop song. Ed Sheeran was accused of this. Someone said he's kind of cool now, which he responds to by saying that's a recession indicator. But what about not just the music, but people dancing to the music? Specifically, I'm talking about strippers. Strippers have been a time-honored tell of recession. People have used the economy around strippers to know if the actual economy is doing good since the 20s, dude. Not just in housing, which you remember from this iconic scene from The Big Short.
House, right?
I have 5 houses and a condo.
Hey, there's a bubble. Trust me, call Bennett by 50.
Now that's housing, but really it's more about strippers as a job. If strippers are unable to have enough clients to make stripping profitable and they have to go work elsewhere, it's usually a sign of bad economic times. As pointed out here, the real recession indicator is that I'm trying to get out of the strip club and get a civilian job, which this person responds to by saying, that's quite literally a real recession indicator. Wall Street Bets has a more, I would say, crass take on it, which is what they call the Hooters Index that came about 3 months ago on Wall Street Bets. The Hooters Index is, if your waitress at Hooters is really attractive, that's a sign of a recession. If your waitress is really attractive, that means there's no available work as something else, which means probably in a recession. However, Hooters just went bankrupt, so I don't really know what that's not a good sign for the economy, but it's also not this. It's tough to say. However, there is research into something like this as I looked more into it. This is from 2009. It's called the, quote, Hot Waitress Economic Index. And this came out in the last recession in New York. Basically, they slowly let the boys go, then the less attractive girls, and these hot girls appeared out of nowhere. Once upon a time, these ladies must have made $1,500 a night lap dancing. It was a lot of people who were doing some kind of like stripper type work that are then moving into the restaurant industry because there's no money in it. And that apparently could be happening now. But what about what they're wearing? That's fashion, which is even more of an important recession indicator. There's the lipstick effect. This is one that Warren Buffett talks about. The lipstick effect is that, ironically, lipstick sales go up during tumultuous economic times. People want to feel more attractive, so they spend more money on fashion and things like lipstick. What's interesting, as I looked into this, is not only are lipstick sales rising right now, Michael Burry, the guy who predicted the last housing crash and is one of the characters played in The Big Short, just sold his entire stock portfolio and bought only one stock, Estee Lauder. This just happened, which is really more of a signal on this than anything else. Now, not all fashion indicators make a lot of sense. Some of these I really couldn't follow at all.
I can tell you if there's going to be a recession. These are the key indicators you need to look for. First, highlights. Are they streaky? Are they chunky? Those highlights, if and when they come back, recession.
Again, I'm not an expert on highlights. I don't know. Could be true, but for me, I have no reference. I couldn't find any economic data backing this one up. But she followed it up with one that I really can't justify.
Number 2, wasabi peas. If you go to the bar and there are like little dishes of wasabi peas out, recession.
That's a question mark from me. I happen to like wasabi peas. I have no idea if that's a sign of recession or not. She might be cooking. But the third one does spark discussion.
You're fucked. Number 3, there's real science behind this one. Skirts, they get shorter during times of economic uncertainty. When the economy is real good, maxi skirts, midi skirts, we're below the knee. When things get totally fakakta in the economy, skirts get shorter. Go look that one up. If you think I'm kidding, I'm not kidding.
This is true. I looked it up, but she got it completely opposite. The actual thing is called the hemline index, and the idea is as the economy gets worse, the skirt length gets longer. It's in fact shorter during good times and longer during recessions. And there's some data to support this hemline index. However, as I really looked into the studies on it, best case I can make is that the hemline index is a lagging indicator where the skirts get longer well after the recession has started or even ended. So if we see longer skirts, it's a sign the recession already happened. Not a great way to predict, but a good way to tell that we were right, I guess. Other fashion also applies to men. I saw this one that spooked me looking at my own closet.
Catch yourself wanting to wear your checkered flannel and your favorite selvage denim, well, that's a recession indicator. The male mind yearns for the lumberjack fits as the recession approaches, but you're in luck because all of these things will last you through the recession, into the depression, and into the World War.
Well, that's not good because my closet is all denim and flannel shirts. Are we in a recession? Well, not today, because another sign of recession is when streamers start shilling their own merch. I'm wearing a Lehman Brothers 2008 global financial crisis sweater and an EBITDA hat. And if you want to celebrate this recession with streamer merch, you can go to failedcos.co, available today. EBITDA hats and Lehman Brothers shirt. EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. It is what accountants have been using at many major companies to pretend to appear healthier than they are. A more fun way to say it would be earnings before I trick dumb auditors. And of course, this is just an iconic throwback to 2008. I can't wait to wear new companies in 10 years after we look at this recession. Pawn shops are also noticing this fashion recession, among other things. Now, the thing about pawn shops is that they are, for the lowest bracket of income, especially in America, they are like the lender of last resort. They are the emergency fund. People don't actually have cash in an emergency fund. They have stuff, and they sell the stuff at a pawn shop to get emergency funds. So when pawn shops are doing well, it is a general sign that more people are dipping into their quote-unquote emergency savings. And that is happening. The National Pawnbrokers Association are noticing that pawn balances have risen across the country in the past 2 years. People are taking longer loans and then pawning things and not coming back to reclaim them. A clear sign, at very least, that the K-shaped economy is continuing to hurt the bottom half. Another major talked about recession indicator has been the military. Now, some people think that rising military recruitment is a pure good thing.
We have no choice. After years of military recruiting shortfalls, enlistments in the U.S. Armed Forces are now the highest in 30 years.
And why is that? Why are they the highest in 30 years?
Because there is such an incredible spirit in the United States of America.
Because there's such an incredible spirit. That's what it is. People see World War III possibly starting in the Middle East, and they think, I have an incredible spirit to get involved. As an American, I would love to die in the Israel-Iran war. And that is why they're signing up. It's definitely not because of the economy. So when I see that the U.S. Army is posting tweets recently, and they passed their re-enlistment goal 6 months early, I think possibly recession indicator, because it turns out the data on this is actually more solid than anywhere else. When military recruitment is up, that is because of a shaky job market. People generally pick the military as their last resort. If they can't find another job, they go to the military. And that holds true in the previous recessions. We have plenty of data on that, but also goes back, long time, to the 20s earlier. In fact, data on this comes from the government themselves. This is a government-produced study that says the recent economic downturn has improved recruiting and retention. We pay less bonuses and we get more people. They're aware of it internally, even if they're not speaking about it publicly. But not everyone chooses to go to the military when they can't find a job. The other area where we're seeing recession indicators is in education. And that is, I think, happening to some of you right now as you look around at a job market that is absolutely fucked and you are feeling the chaos and you decide, you know what, I'm gonna go back to school. Specifically, grad school. Law school is the primary one, but grad school in general. Law school applications have started to skyrocket this year. It's at all-time highs at many schools. The theory behind it makes sense. It's like, I'm gonna wait a few years out and I'm gonna build my skill set so when the economy rebounds, I'll have, but in practice, it's pretty damaging. It's not that you can't learn anything, and it's not that the idea doesn't make some sense. It's that grad school is expensive. And so this classic recession move has some real downsides, and namely with student loans. Because student loans are another big economic indicator. I've been talking about this for a year plus. us. But recently, on May 5th, they restarted having to be able to actually pay your student loans. You were able to avoid it and not have any downsides for a long time. On May, you had to start paying them. And immediately, we are seeing a spike in searches for credit score student loans and student loans help. These things are spiking, and millions of student loan borrowers are immediately behind on their payments. That is happening now. Additionally, wage garnishing was announced, where if you're behind on your payments, they're gonna start taking your wages. As of 2 days ago, when this article came out, credit scores have started to decline for millions of US users. The impacts have been ignored and avoided for a long time. They're being hit right now. These are real recession indicators. These people either have less money from their wages or less money to spend on other things because they're spending their student loans that does not go into the economy. This also applies to housing. Now, when people think of a recession, especially if you're younger, the only one you even know, and that one even barely, is the 2008 recession, which is all about housing. But most recessions in history are not about housing. And it's possible that if we're in one now, it'll have nothing to do with housing. However, looking at housing, you see signs of stress as well. This year, it was supposed to recover. It was supposed to be like the housing prices that were starting to flatline or drop would bounce back, but it has not happened. The opposite is happening. Now, again, most of you are young, you don't care. You, in fact, would like prices to go down. But the economy is often dependent in many regions on housing stability or price increases. And what we have now is the opposite. There is 500,000 more sellers than buyers. At first it was a trickle, now it's a stream. Pretty soon it'll be a flood of people trying to list their houses and having to cut the price to get it sold. People are sitting on the market unable to sell. Especially in big regions like Texas and Florida, people cannot find a buyer at the price they think they were supposed to get. People who bought dozens of Airbnbs, they're not making the money they used to get, they can't unload them. I don't know about a crash, but a meeting with reality is clearly coming for some of the most overbought housing areas in the United States. And it's becoming more and more obvious as the months go by and more things do not sell. However, for renters, the story is more positive in that if you can't afford paying your rent in 2025, well, there's new ways to do that, like Flex, which is flexible rent, which lets you take a loan to pay your rent. It's like Klarna, but for your rent. Rent now, pay later. What a brilliant innovation. How does Wall Street keep innovating so many incredible new financial instruments? Now, a layman might think this is just another word for debt, yet again. And in fact, risky debt, because the data shows that people don't pay their rent as an absolute last resort. If you're low on money, you might skip payments on subscriptions or gym membership or the jet ski you leased. You might even cut back on purchases. But the last thing that usually gets cut from someone's budget is their rent payment, because nobody wants to be homeless in America. And so if we're getting to the point where people have to do flexible rent payments, that is a recession indicator. No doubt about it. This shouldn't exist in a regular economy. This is a sign of serious stress. And again, the number of people Googling file bankruptcy is rising heading into this year. So the problem is extreme. Maybe we need to get out of the country. Maybe we need to travel. However, travel's not showing indicators. If you talk to CEOs in the travel industry, we're already there. The Southwest CEO on an earnings call openly said, yeah, I don't know about the rest of the country or the economy. We're in a recession. It's just, we're not seeing the flights or the travel that we would normally see. Now, this could be self-inflicted. Again, it's hard to disentangle this. Some companies like Dollar Tree, for example, some companies are claiming recession when it may be their own economic performance. Dollar Tree is having a bit of a downturn, which normally doesn't happen in a recession, but it could be because they're getting outcompeted by Walmart. It's hard to tell what's the economy and what's individual performance, but we're seeing this not just from Southwest, but across the flight industry. All US airlines are seeing travel demand falter. And that is not just people not wanting to go to the United States, which is happening as some of our allies for some reason are pissed off, but also US travelers leaving. A large part of what was boosting the economy was US travel, especially the top end of that K, spending more on travel or tourism around the country. You know, you fly to Disneyland, take your family there. That's happening less and less. Hotels are facing slowing growth. This has to do with less foreign travelers. We're seeing slowing tourism to the United States. And that might not be a recession indicator, but that certainly doesn't help if we're having one. That's gonna be a problem. If people aren't coming here to spend money, hurts a lot of local economies. Finally, the big thing that's been holding up the economy, tech. Tech will save us. Certainly, all this stuff in the rest of the economy could be a bad sign, but tech is our rock solid golden elevator to the top that will keep us safe. Well, There's some recession indicators in the tech world as well. I want to take you back to 2012, when a company called WhatsApp launched. WhatsApp was an immediate success that grew rather quickly. And one of their core philosophies in a blog post that is still up, they said why we don't sell ads. We want to make a product that isn't just another ad clearinghouse. We want to spend our time building a service people wanted to use because it worked and saved them money and made their lives better in a small way. We're going to do what people want to do every day, avoid ads. No one wakes up excited to see more advertising, unless it's a Marketing Monday ad review. No one goes to sleep thinking about the ads they'll see tomorrow. Clearly someone hasn't worked in marketing, because sometimes you do that. Remember, when advertising is involved, you, the user, are the product. Now, this is a powerful fucking statement. I remember this blog from back in 2012, and I always thought it spoke as a good credit to WhatsApp and even to Facebook for keeping it this way after buying them. As of yesterday...
Welcome back. Take a look at shares of Meta. They are higher this morning. This after the company announced it was taking a step to bring ads to its WhatsApp platform, specifically in the Updates tab.
Recession indicator! They lasted 13 years with no ads, and finally, to keep Meta's juggernaut growth going, they had to put ads in WhatsApp, an app that charges you. Other indicators in tech are harder to tell. I will say, one thing I haven't mentioned this whole presentation is the stock market. And the reason I haven't is because the stock market is doing quite well, especially among the biggest tech stocks. There's no getting around it. And many people have pointed out, me included, that over the years, the disconnect from the real economy and the highest end of the stock market is becoming more and more apparent. And no one can deny the performance of these magnificent tech companies. But I don't think that is cause for us to ignore these other signals, including the fact that in SF warehouse parties are now making you pitch your startup to get in.
How many users? How many users?
She's asking how many users does she have on her startup. Finally, I want to talk about pets, but I decided to cut this section because it's really sad. I mentioned the pet snacks, but also, without getting into too much detail, a big sign of recession is when people abandon their pets. And those numbers are indeed on the rise. If you think about it from a human being perspective, people would only do when they are out of options. It is a sign of increased economic stress. I don't want to get too depressing on this one, okay? In my recession indicators PowerPoint. But what does this all mean? What does this all mean? Am I just Jim Carrey in the number 23, pointing at random signals and trying to put it all together? Quite possibly. Maybe all of this means nothing. But the questions people have been asking are continuing to rise. How does one deal with an economic recession? I've looked into this as well. Listen, the answer is very different depending on who you are and how much economic security you already have. But the two rules that are really simple: step one, avoid new debt. Step two, if you've got a job right now, don't quit unless you got a new one. These two things are 90% of the advice you can give someone. If you believe, as these indicators do, that the economy might go into a turbulent time. Step three, rob a bank, yeah. What's the difference between a recession and a depression? It's a great question. A recession is when your neighbor loses your job. A depression is when you lose your job. And a recovery is when he loses his job. Hey, yo! And also, one good thing, if there's another recession, do my parents have to get divorced again? No. If you've already had the bad thing, you're safe for the second time around. There's no double jeopardy in recessions. Are we completely cooked? Charlie asks. And the answer, I think, is no. When I look around with all these indicators, it's not necessarily that we're having proof of an economic recession. Nobody knows. Don't make any big short bets. What I think is that we are in a time, more than I've ever seen it, of really, really, really high uncertainty. We can't see more than a few feet in front of our faces. That is my takeaway from these recession indicators. We are not just in an economic recession, that's a possibility, but we're in a vibes recession. We are in a friendship recession. We are in a recession of human connection. We are in a recession of third places, of niceness to each other online. And that is making all of this more scary. As we see possible wars and the rise of technology like AI that is coming so fast, no one can prepare for it, people don't know what the future will look like, and that makes them anxious and uncertain. And all we can do is sit on our phones and monitor it, which feels very anxiety inducing. I'm guilty of this myself, dude. As I read the news every day, sometimes I feel like, wow, I'm just sort of building up an anxiety that I can't do any action about. And there's science behind this. Uncertainty is something the human brain hates. And what makes it worse, this comment really spoke to me. What makes it worse is that there's a general sense from the most powerful in our society that nothing is wrong. Everything is fine. The biggest corporations are doing well. The media tells you inflation's lowering, governments tell you it's fine, and you feel like, no. We can look around. I mean, I can just feel the difference between the job market now and the job market when I graduated in the 1800s. I'm not gonna end this on a fake positive note, but I do wanna say something. There's this quote from a Nobel Prize winner in physics. The future is uncertain, but this uncertainty is at the very heart of human creativity. I do believe this is true. If you look at the grand history of humanity, we've had many worse and more uncertain times than this, and we've found our way through and to a general increase in the quality of human life. I believe in this. And I was at the protest this weekend, and I actually felt a real sense of hope. Seeing other people in person and talking to them reaffirmed that I like people when there's not a screen between us. I generally have a positive sense on our capability and our human spirit to overcome tough times. But I'm not going to end on a pure positive note. I want to tell you a piece of advice that my boss at NVIDIA gave me that has really stuck with me. I would hire people for our team at NVIDIA, and I would often try to sell them on the company. I would play down the hard parts of the job that I was hiring them to do, and I would play up the good parts. I would talk about good salary or good benefits, and I would not talk about the challenges of the job. And my boss told me that if you're going to deal with something difficult, what people want is to be told up front what they're getting into, to be as honest as possible that there's going to be a challenging time ahead. And if people choose that going in, they are much more resilient when that time comes, and they're much more able to handle it. The honesty matters. So I want to end by saying I truly personally believe that we are headed in for a rough couple years, but I think we are capable of it. I think human beings, society is capable of it. I think knowing about it and being informed about it does not have to mean depression. So if you share that idea, that is the kind of community I'm trying to create here on Marketing Monday and with Lemonade Stand and others. So thank you for watching Marketing Monday. Hope you enjoyed this update on recession.